I'm Richard Hyatt, and today, for the very first time, we're going to tell the truth about Montravious Thomas. We'll be talking with controversial school board members Frank Myers and John Thomas about a case that for the past 10 months has been close to the hearts of people throughout Muskogee County. The 12th of September 2016 is a date Montravious Thomas will never forget. Until that fateful day, he was an ordinary 13-year-old student at East Columbus Magnet Academy. He had problems, and his behavior caused him to be put under an individual educational program. He was referred to AIM, an alternative education program for troubled students at the Edgewood Student Service Center in Columbus. What happened to him that September 12th is a tragedy. A Muskogee County school bus picked Montravious up at home and delivered him to Edgewood for his first day in AIM. He was assigned to room 109 to work with Bryant Mosley, a behavioral specialist employed by Mentoring and Behavior Services, a contract service provider with the Muskogee County School District. Montravious walked into that classroom, and within an hour, he was carried out like a sack of potatoes. Allegations are that Mosley, a former college football linebacker, body slammed the student 5 times after the teenager got out of control. Officials unsuccessfully tried to call his mother, but no one called 911 or contacted higher-ups in the school district. No one provided medical attention. Someone decided to send him home on a Muskogee County school bus. Exclusive footage on a school surveillance camera obtained by Muskogee All, Georgia shows Mosley carrying the youth down the hall to a waiting bus. That afternoon, the 8th grader's mother took him to the Midtown Medical Center in Columbus, where a decision was made to airlift him to Eggleston Children's Hospital in Atlanta. Doctors there determined he had suffered a broken leg, permanent nerve damage, and an injured kneecap. 5 weeks later, on October 18th, after 4 operations, doctors were forced to amputate his right leg just below the knee. School officials had been closed-mouthed about the event, but that same day, they issued a statement that distanced them from Mosley and the events at Edgewood Student Service Center. The statement claimed Montravious Thomas was not in distress and had been up and walking around after the incident. 5 days after that statement, the surveillance video was posted on All on Georgia Muskogee. It showed Mosley carrying Montravious down the hall and physically loading him on the school bus. That video has been shown and shared all over the world. 10 months have passed, and we still don't know the facts. No charges have been filed, and an investigation by the Columbus Police Department is still pending. A $25 million lawsuit against the school district and others was filed on March 15th of this year in state court in Columbus. Meanwhile, Montravious Thomas continues medical treatments. He missed most of the 2016-17 school year, and he won't be back in class until late this year. While everyone waits, the judicial system meanders along. Within the past 2 weeks, new attention was drawn to the incident when Frank Myers and John Thomas contacted the law firm representing Montravious and his family. In an email, they said they had pertinent information regarding the case and that they are willing to give attorney Forrest B. Johnson sworn statements regarding the case. Greg Ellington, the school district attorney, said statements to the opposing counsel would be inappropriate. This led to a proposal to hire outside attorneys to assist the school board. This situation brings up new questions and new topics. And we're about to find out answers to those questions and many more from Frank Myers and John Thomas. They will share today what they know about a terrible incident that left a young person without his right leg and threatens the pocketbook of the Muskogee County School District. I'll be asking questions today that are shared by many people in this community. And I'll begin with John Thomas. John, this sounds almost like a cliche, for it's been asked many times in many places. But when did you know, and what did you know regarding the Montravious Thomas incident?
Well, Richard, it took a few days for us to get to knowing anything because the whole story began with rumors. We heard a rumor that a student had been injured. We heard a rumor that he'd been airlifted to Atlanta for medical assistance. And when we got that information, Frank sent an email to Dr. Lewis asking if there were any truth to what had happened or what we were hearing. A day later, Dr. Lewis responded with an email to the board saying the student had been injured, but he couldn't say more at that time because of legal advice. So it wasn't until the next board meeting where we met in executive session and we were briefed on the situation. We were told basically that the student had been injured, that he had received some medical treatment, but that he was going to be fine.
Well, Frank, the public knew nothing about Montravious until a story on All in Georgia Muskogee, almost a month after his injury. As a board member, did this time lag concern you?
Well, yeah, I was concerned from the very beginning because of the lack of information that we were getting and the quality of that information. One thing to follow up on what John just said, the board was not even immediately notified of this incident, which was real strange because John will tell you, if there's a fender bender with a bus in a parking lot somewhere, we get an email as board members. So we started hearing these rumors that John's talking about. I just thought to myself, I just can't believe, because what I heard and the thing that came to me was this kid had been, some kid had been horribly injured at AIM and had been airlifted out to the hospital in Atlanta, which raises a lot of red flags. So, I mean, it was 18 days later when I wrote this email to Dr. Lewis that John's talking about. And then the next day, as John said, Dr. Lewis said, it happened, something's happened, but we're not going to talk about it on legal advice. And then we met in executive session, as John mentioned, 10 days later, and we were to say severely misled as to Montravious's condition. That would be an understatement.
The extent of his injuries.
Yeah, the extent of his injuries. Mm-hmm. And what was even worse to me was the tone in that meeting. The lawyer, Miss Slayton, Greg Ellington was not there, as I recall. I think he was on vacation with his family. And Dr. Lewis, they just trashed this young kid. They trashed his mother. It was kind of a blame the victim type of mentality, and that bothered me greatly. And I will tell you, they did a great sales job in that meeting, because I've been practicing plaintiff's law for almost 30 years, and I walked out of that room that night believing that the worst problem we had as a school district in terms of our liability was the delay in rendering aid to this young man. Well, it wasn't a delay. It was no aid was rendered whatsoever.
None at all.
Zero. So I'm kind of bleeding over into the why I believe there was a cover-up of this thing. And if I could, I'll just go ahead and finish this point at this time. We received individual letters to board members from Forrest Johnson and Associates, what we call anti-litem notices under the law, but I didn't know what it was. But again, I heard a rumor instead of getting information from the superintendent. I heard I had a letter down there that said, I was fixing to be sued for $5 million. Well, that didn't end up being true. It just ended up being the anti-litem notice. But again, those letters were not delivered to us in a timely fashion. That would have been about 28 days after I think he was hurt. I'm not sure about that.
Well, how was that delay explained?
We just forgot. They always blame it on a staff member, which was just unbelievable. And the other delay of the 18 days was, we forgot and blamed it on a staff member. You might have forgotten immediately because I'm sure there was a pressure cooker going on with the extent of this kid's injuries, but you don't forget days 2 through 17. And by the way, this is interesting. This young man was injured on the very day that we had a board meeting that particular night. I don't even know if John knew about that, but we could have been told about this on that night, the night he was injured, and we were not told that night. And people knew at the Muskogee County Public Education Center. And then, as John mentioned, and the sixth thing that comes up in terms of the cover-up is, on a Friday, shortly thereafter, they come out with this press release on a Friday afternoon claiming that this young man was walking around and not in distress, as you mentioned. And then, thank goodness, All on Georgia came up, I think it was a Sunday following that Friday, with video showing that there was just no way that statement that was put out by the school system could have been true. It was just impossible.
Well, John, once that video was public, did that change the atmosphere within the school board? Were people wanting to know more, or were they still?
I think that it certainly put the board members in a position of wanting more information and asking for it and asking to be updated and brought up to speed with what was going on.
Were you brought up to speed?
No, not really. I mean, the story was that he'd been up and walking around in no apparent distress on Friday, and I think it was just 3 days later that his leg was actually amputated.
Eight, but
All right.
I just looked at it today, but sure.
Okay. The story that was given to us was that we shouldn't expect anything bad to come out of this, in a nutshell, and quite the opposite was true all along.
Well, this question's for both of you, but once you found out that Montravious's leg had been amputated, how were you affected personally?
I was mad as hell.
I was devastated. I can't imagine being a young man with a situation like that and losing a limb.
Were you getting information other than from the news media?
No, not at that
all.
point.
No.
But as a board member, I was mad. I didn't even, because I had been led to believe there was going to be a complete recovery. And I was like, well, there has got to be something wrong here. And at that point, we didn't know any of this stuff I just told you about was even going to matter, but I did keep notes because the red flags had been raised along the way. Why were we not notified as school board members about this horrible situation?
Well, let's talk about the surveillance video that All on Georgia Muskogee posted in late October. This was certainly a blockbuster event in the news business and in the education world. This showed everyone how serious this incident really was. How was that video explained by school officials, or did they explain it?
What I'd read was that they claimed that the video did not contradict the statement that they had given out on the Friday before, which was absolutely absurd.
Because their statement said he was up and walking around, and the video shows Bryant Mosley carrying him down the hall. How was that passed off?
I think they actually told us that Montravious wanted to be carried out for the attention that he would get from his peers, so they'd go, wow, what happened to you? And it was some kind of a badge of honor that he had been involved in something and now he was being carried out.
Well, Frank, in March of this year, Montravious' attorneys dropped a $25 million lawsuit on the school district. They directed that at Superintendent David Lewis and a lot of other parties that were involved in this incident. Tell me what happened. I mean, were you surprised at a $25 million lawsuit, or had you been anticipating it?
Is shocking. I mean, this young man is obviously very badly injured, and he should be compensated. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. And if a jury finds that the Muskogee County School District is legally responsible, we need to pay our part of it. But by that time, I knew the underlying facts some of which we've already relayed to you today. So no, I was not surprised that some big number had been put on this lawsuit, because it really is an aggravated situation. And it's not aggravated by two school board members who are telling the truth about what happened. It's aggravated by the underlying conduct, the cover-up, the lack of care to this young man.
Well, you've been an attorney 25 or 30 years. Does the slowness of this proceeding, is this normal in a case like this?
It depends. I mean, look, we on John's behalf, I contacted the plaintiff's attorneys last week, and I can update you that I did get a message from those attorneys, I guess Friday, and I checked my school board phone, and a paralegal called me to line up my deposition, or our depositions, but I don't know that we'll ever give a deposition in this case. Our purpose here today, and let me just thank you and all on Georgia for doing this. Our purpose here today is to get information out to the public. The public deserves to know. There's justice is not just for Montravious. It's for the taxpayers. It's for the school system. It's for David Lewis. It's for these lawyers. Justice is an all-encompassing term. And we're here today, I'm here today, and John can speak for himself, because I want this information out there in the public's consciousness.
Have there been efforts to stifle that information?
Oh yeah, it's a constant effort at the Muskogee County School District. I mean, John and I have been ignored basically as school board members. I'm telling you, the citizens of District 2 and 8, in my opinion, are being cheated, because the superintendent just doesn't share information with us generally. And so...
Well, let me interrupt you.
Okay.
Is he sharing information with the other board members?
He uses it as barter, is what information is barter. If you are a good board member, you get information. We've just run this, and it's not really Dr. Lewis's fault. He kind of inherited this, but this school system has been run where the superintendent somehow believes that the board works for him or her and not the other way around. And that's one of the reasons we're in this pickle that we're in tonight, but that's probably another story for another day.
Well, has the board been kept abreast of this case and how it's progressing or not?
Not at all. Richard, the only thing we've been told most recently was the case is in discovery. That's the complete amount of information we've been given.
All of this, this case has been based on information, or sometimes a lack of information. There is usually someone who wants to step forward and share what they know. Has this case had anyone who fits that whistleblower category?
As a matter of fact, Richard, there is someone who, in this case, we have to call him a hero. Eddie Powell is his name. At the time of the incident, he was an assistant principal at AIM. On that particular day, he was the highest ranking administrative official on the school property because the principal was away on religious leave. Eddie, shortly before we found out that Montravious' leg had been amputated, Eddie came to us and told us exactly what had transpired that day. He provided us with a fair amount of documentation, emails that were sent back and forth before and after the incident, and also provided us with a very extensive surveillance video, which we saw with our own eyes how things happened, what happened, and how Montravious ended up being carried out of the classroom.
Well, that's the video that we've been talking about earlier.
Yes.
And that video was certainly played a huge role in the progress of this case. Without it, I don't know where we would be today. But it's never been disclosed where the video came from until today. And when you obtained that video and first viewed it, did you think about sitting on it? Or did you know what you wanted to do with it once you saw it?
It never crossed our minds to sit on it. On the one hand, you have this man who's got the courage to come forward and show the truth about what had happened. And at perhaps at some personal risk to himself or his career. And then you have us as board members. We're now in possession of something that's very relevant to the case. And I think that we had a legal and moral responsibility at that time to get that information out. And so that's when we provided that to All on Georgia.
Well, Frank, what has happened to Eddie Powell since that video went public?
I had to make a list. He has suffered some repercussions, but he's doing well. I know from visiting with him over time, his laptop was confiscated. That's where the video was. He was transferred out of AIM. He was told he was going to be demoted. He asked to meet with Dr. Lewis, and he stood up to Dr. Lewis. Many people don't, but he did. I think we voted the other night. Wasn't he on the list where he's going to be an assistant principal?
No, well, he was on the list to have his contract renewed as an employee of the Muskogee County School District.
Okay. So he's told me he's going to be, he was told that he's going to be an assistant principal, but he just doesn't know where yet. Apparently it's not going to be AIM. He was told by Dr. Lewis that he would be on probation. And the question that just outrages John and me is why? I mean, here's the guy who's telling the truth. You don't punish people who tell the truth, but he's apparently going to be on some type of probation. And that's really kind of epitomizes what's wrong with our school system. There's this culture of fear. And there are so many people that behind the scenes do talk to John and me because, you know, I'm the bigger mouth of the two of us, but we're both steadfast in trying to do what we're trying to do, and we're in lockstep in terms of reforms for the school district. But you know, I think Dr. Lewis's his conduct with Eddie is probably going to cost us another lawsuit under the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, some kind of theory like that. And I, you know, from my angle, knowing that he had all this pressure put on him, that he was going to be demoted, the threat of being demoted, you know, for telling the truth, I think Eddie probably has a great lawsuit, which is bad for the district. But you know, Dr. Lewis didn't have to do the things he did with Eddie. He didn't have to handle him those ways, the way he did. But I will tell you this: John's right. I mean, he's a hero.
Well, until
We wouldn't be sitting in this room today if it weren't for Eddie Powell. I mean, we wouldn't have any evidence. People would be looking at us like we were crazy. But that video just does not lie.
well, his name has never been disclosed until today. He was always referred to as a unknown source or whatever. But people within the school district hierarchy probably figured out who had access to that video. So has he ever been confronted about his role or potential role in having that video going public?
I don't know.
He's never mentioned anything to me about the video, but I do know that he saw the writing on the wall the day after the incident when he learned for the first time that a student had been injured. And he was the administrator in charge that day. So he started asking the questions. Did we follow the proper procedures? Did we attend the protocol that was in place? And the answer was no. The answer was no. There was no medical assistance call made. There was no written report made for the incident, as was required by the protocol. So Eddie filed a report to the Georgia Professional Standards and Ethics Commission and wrote up the teacher who should have made those reports and followed that protocol. And it was then, when he was told to withdraw that report, that was when the light came on for Eddie and said, I've got to look out for myself here because the truth's got to come out, and I believe that there's going to be efforts made to keep it quiet.
And can I add here?
Well, this one thing, the State Ethics Commission kicked that back to Muskogee County for them to deal with it.
Yes.
Has there been any action taken on that complaint?
Not that we
Not to
know
my
of.
knowledge.
It's supposed to be kicked back to the school board, and we haven't heard a peep out of any of that.
No.
Well, one last thing before I get back to you. Is it a coincidence that so many of the people who were in the circle at Edgewood have been either retired or been transferred? Is that a coincidence?
I don't think so. And I think, these are not just limited to the AIM program. We've had a record number of people leaving the district. I mean, I don't mind saying, I think it's just a toxic environment.
Well, retirements and resignations and transfers at this time of the year are not unusual.
Right.
They come at the end of the school year. But it seems from looking at the personnel report, there does seem to be an inordinate number of special ed teachers who are going somewhere. They're not staying here. Has there been any discussion about that?
We have discussed that extensively at the board meetings, because I cannot understand how a district like ours, with everything that this area has to offer, has so much trouble in attracting and retaining special ed teachers. And if there is a problem with that, then I've proposed in the meeting that we offer special bonuses, special retainment bonuses, whatever it takes.
Which is not unusual in that field.
No, it's not. But nothing like that has happened. Well, I got to correct myself there. I know that we have paid some extra supplement for some special ed teachers, but we still haven't addressed the shortfall that we have in that department.
Before we leave the topic of Eddie Powell, are there any other things we should know about him?
Yeah, John reminded me of a couple of things, and I want to make sure this is clear. Mr. Powell was the top-ranking person in the school there that day when Montravious was hurt, and he was not notified. I don't know if you made that clear or not.
Okay. Yeah, he had no idea that an injury of that nature had occurred, that a student had even been injured.
He didn't find out until the next day when Montravious's mother came and said, "What happened to my child yesterday?" And that was part of what
That's when
John
he went back and started looking at the tapes.
And John said that's probably when the light bulb went off in his head that this might not have a happy ending for him. And the other thing that I think adds to his legal claims that I wanted to make sure was clear is when he wrote up this employee for not doing her job, he was threatened by the Muskogee County School District's legal counsel that if he did not withdraw that letter to the Standards Commission or whatever it's called, that there was going to be repercussions.
That he would be written up.
He'd be written up. And so they're threatening him with punishing him for telling the truth. And that's part of the culture that I think John and I are just continuously troubled by.
Well, certainly you're talking about an overall culture, but there had to be strange conversations going on in the aftermath of September 12th, particularly as it progressed and his leg was amputated. There had to be some unusual conversations.
And there were, and so I know we don't want to get bogged down in a timeline, but basically, you're looking at about a month after this that we even find out, they even acknowledged to the board that something had happened, and then they sugarcoated it. So everything that was happening, this chaos that I think was probably taking place, it was taking place outside the full board. I don't know how many board members knew about it at the time, but the administration clearly was not telling the truth. Well, they hadn't really started not telling the truth. There was just a vacuum of information at that point that we weren't getting any information. And I'm serious. When I left that closed door meeting, I thought to myself, the only problem we've got is this kid's going to be okay. I took their word for it, and we just didn't call for medical assistance timely. And but it's kind of, I remember asking about insurance coverage and stuff like that, but they had me completely bamboozled. And part of me is kind of mad that I fell for it, because it's such a serious situation.
Well, this all leads us back to Camelot Education, because a few months ago, Dr. Lewis proposed hiring this firm from Texas to manage the district's alternative education programs. And for the first time, really, in the 10 months since Montravious' injury, his name was floated around the school board meetings. John, you and Frank and Kia Chambers led the effort to defeat that proposal.
Right.
But how were you connecting Montravious Thomas and Camelot?
Well, during the Camelot discussions, Montravious' name came up again because I reminded people that it was a contract employee who injured Montravious in the first place. So now the superintendent was proposing to bring in a company that had kind of a sketchy background, stories of abuse, allegations, whatever, from across the country, everywhere they operated. And it was enough to cause concern. Why would we go from a small local company that had already caused this injury to a student and turn all these students over to a wholesale, to an entire company of contracted employees? And it just didn't seem like it would make good sense.
Well, all of this leaves the alternative education program in shambles. The faculty at AIM sent a proposal of how to rectify these issues. That hasn't been discussed yet. But we've got just a few months to put this back together again.
Well, referring to that letter from the faculty, they have great ideas. I'm sure that it's a wish list, a lot of stuff they'd never be able to achieve. But I think, and it's like Vanessa Jackson said in the meeting, we have a good program in place. We need to support it with more resources. Why would we spend $6.4 million just for the program in a year when we've got a program in place that needs our support, that can get the job done locally?
Well, at this point, here at midsummer, there's not time to make too many changes out there. But yet when you read the faculty proposals, the name of Montravious Thomas is never mentioned, but this case is all over that document. So many of the things they're talking about, more cameras, more security, additional administrators. You can trace all of that back to Montravious Thomas and what happened last September.
Right.
So, but of course, in recent weeks, the two of you created a stir when you offered to provide sworn statements to Forrest B. Johnson and Associates, the law firm representing Montravious Thomas. What led you guys to do that? That is an unusual offer to be made. And essentially, you're going to, if this happens, you will be providing information to a law firm that's suing your school district for $25 million. So why would you do that?
Can I jump in?
Go ahead.
Thanks. There was actually a suggestion made somewhere that we would actually be helping Montravious, their side, by what we've offered to do to give depositions. All we're trying to do is get out the truth. I'm not on anybody's side. I'm on. I don't mean to sound corny, but we're not trying to help Montravious. We're not trying to hurt anybody. We're trying to promote the free flow of information. And so we ended up here, instead of, and I gave you the update on Forrest Johnson, haven't heard from them, but I know what's going to happen because I've been doing this for almost 30 years. They're going to notice our depositions, they're going to put us under subpoena, and then the motions are going to start flying. It's called a motion for protective order. If these lawyers that we have handling this know what they're doing, and I don't know that they do. That's another story for another time. But, then there's going to be tens of thousands of dollars fighting over some motion, and then you're going to have all this media coverage and all this controversy, and, you referred to us as controversial. I don't see anything controversial about what you and I do. I think we just do the right thing. But I get how, people would say it's controversial, maybe just because it's different and we don't go along. But I wanted to just cut to the chase after I saw the reaction from the school board lawyers and Dr. Lewis and Ms. Hughley Green. I mean, this idea that they're going to put together some independent counsel to lead us through an alleged problem that we're going to have with accreditation, it is just laughable. It's laughable, number one, that telling the truth is ever going to get you in trouble. It never has gotten anybody in trouble. It's laughable that this would cause trouble with accreditation. It doesn't. Now, there's some underlying conduct that may well cause some trouble with accreditation. I think this independent counsel was cooked up just to try to silence John and me. And the truth is, we came up with this idea about hopefully sitting down with you, and again, we appreciate you letting us do it, just so we can get the facts out there. And so now Forrest Johnson can see what we've got to say, and he can determine whether he wants to take our deposition. But I was a lot more interested in getting the facts out than anything else. We have been frustrated. We've gone through every correct channel that we could as elected officials. And I got a friend of mine who has a higher office and that he's elected to, and he kids me about being on the school board, and because it's not the most glamorous position, but we are elected officials. We represent 1/8 of this city each. And when we go to the district attorney and tell her that there's been wrongdoing and show her the evidence and submit these affidavits that I hope you'll put on your website, I expect action. And the truth is, we got action. We got a referral to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation after about an hour's meeting with 2 GBI agents, a district attorney and an assistant, John, myself, and a Superior Court judge. And then all of a sudden, within a week, that investigation has just vanished into thin air. And so that's a question that gets raised by this. I mean, I'm not some conspiracy, Oliver Stone or whatever, I'm not some conspiracy theorist, but it just makes you wonder, what in the heck happened to the criminal investigation? And those are the kinds of questions that I think John and I want to see people asking. And so that's why we're here.
What happened to the police investigation?
Well, and that's another one. See, there was a conflict built in. People need to understand, I'm glad you brought that up. There's a lady, Lieutenant Askew.
Consuela Askew.
Female, who was on the scene. I don't know if she witnessed any of the body slams, but she is a shared employee between the police department and the school district. The school district actually pays part of her salary, and Lieutenant Askew is in charge of whatever investigation they may have going on right now. And I don't think it's much investigation at all. Truthfully, I think it's just one of these things where they're going to just hopefully this all just goes away.
Why would the police department not investigate?
Well, they are investigating, but they're using an employee of the school system, what they call a shared employee, where we pay, as the school district pays this lady's salary, but she's a participant, or at least a witness. She was on the scene.
Part of it.
Yeah, of the day Montravious was hurt. I mean, you cannot be objective when you're in that position. And that's why we were calling on the DA to get the GBI involved in that and another matter that we can talk about another time. And because what I really want out of this is an unbiased investigation, and let it just fall out like it falls out. But we all deserve the truth. Everybody deserves the truth about what happened, and especially the young man who just will never have a leg again.
In your opinions, will this case ever make it into a court of law?
I'll defer to Frank on that for a legal opinion.
I have no idea. I really don't. I'm concerned about our level of competence in our legal counsel. I mean, there's one thing to know parliamentary procedure, and there's another to defend a horrendous tort case, which this is. And to my knowledge, none of the 3 lawyers who are representing us have any experience at all in defending these types of things, but these types of cases.
What about the third-party firm that they've employed?
Hartley. See, that's part of the Georgia School Board Association. Somehow we get our insurance coverage through the School Board Association. He's the general counsel for the School Board Association. I've looked up his resume. I don't see any litigation in his background, and that's troublesome to me. But again, it's just one of these deals where that's another story for another day. But I mean, the Georgia School Board Association is not helpful to the Muskogee County School District in my view. I don't think we get any value for being involved with that
But
group.
might it be considered premature to employ litigants at this point?
No, a lawsuit has been filed, and I guess an answer has been filed. We've filed a response as a school district, I hope. But like John was saying, we're not getting briefed on this. Well, all we're hearing is we're in discovery. I mean, I don't know. I don't even. Maybe there's some other lawyers from our local council's firm, because they do have litigators. Maybe they're involved. But if they have, we're not being briefed on it. I mean, Montravious is a dirty word at the school district. And I'm so glad John and them talked about it, especially during this Camelot situation, because, you know, that is what Camelot is supposed to be handling. So I think I rambled on your question, but I don't know. I have no idea. I think $25 million is way too, too much money. I think this young man needs to be compensated, but the $25 million does not, as a lawyer, does not stick with me. I do remember, though, in that executive session that night when they said it was a $5 million a demand on this anti-litem notice, and everybody just rolled their eyes, including me, because of the facts that had been given us by our own lawyers, which were just not even close to what was going on. I mean, this kid lost his leg, I think, 8 days after that night that we were told we should expect a complete recovery. And he had, as I understand, he had 4 surgeries. So my guess is he had been through probably 3 of those surgeries trying to save his leg. So there was no basis whatsoever for these lawyers, our own lawyers, to tell us that a full recovery was expected.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, and it has puzzled me why officials of the school district have never contacted that family, have never gone to drop in on, visit him, see how he's doing. And he has been persona non grata in many ways. One of his former teachers did go to see him. He's no longer a school teacher or special ed teacher. And that is the only person from the world of education that has reached out and visited that young man.
We were told that some collection had been taken up to turn the mother's lights back on or something, that some effort had been made.
There was a page on a Facebook page or something in social media where they were trying to raise money, because if you recall, immediately after the incident, and he was hospitalized in Atlanta, he was up there for 78 days in the hospital.
Right.
That his mother lost her job, and so there were all kind of people reaching out to help, and there were reports that within the administration building on Macon Road there had been a collection made, to help out, but his lawyers say that they were never aware. There was money coming in, but they were never aware of the source or sources.
Well, I hope we were told the truth. I just don't know.
Well, this question's for both of you. We've covered a wide range of topics in the last hour, but there's always other things that people want to discuss. So this is your chance to put those issues on the table. John, is there some issue gnawing at you that you want to talk about before we close?
One of my greatest concerns as a board member has always been to have enough information to be able to make a decision when it comes to votes, to do my job as a school board member. And it's been 2.5 years now. I've been involved with passing 3 budgets, and without exception, each time we're basically passing a 1-page summary. I've asked over and over for more information behind the budget, and I've asked for access to the accounting system on a read-only basis. It's all been denied. We even had to take a vote to say, no, you can't look at the books. So that's been very frustrating. And it's made it difficult to feel like I'm accomplishing anything as a board member.
All right.
The only thing I really have left is I just think, after our experience with the district attorney, I wish that she would recuse herself, call Atlanta, get a special prosecutor down here. The GBI we had actually already been lined up with interviews with the GBI agent, and then they were abruptly canceled. And I mean, this was within a week of the district attorney Slater's letter to the GBI calling for their help. And I mean, it was abrupt. He was scheduled that afternoon. I was 10 o'clock in the morning, and they said, we're going to postpone. But it's clear that, and we have brought issues to District Attorney Slater previous to this one, that she did not follow up on. In fact, we didn't even get the courtesy of a phone call.
No.
We can talk about that another time. But people need to be able to have confidence in their judicial system. And I think she should recuse herself. And what I would like to see happen is just maybe this could be the catalyst for turning over a new era. And I'd like to see Dr. Lewis and these lawyers sit down with you or sit down with somebody and for them to answer these questions instead of hiding behind this, oh, we're in litigation, we can't talk about it. Because people do deserve to know the truth. And I'm sure my plea for that is going to fall on deaf ears, because Dr. Lewis was quoted in the paper of last week of saying, whatever I said was, whatever I had to say was patently false. Well, he didn't even know what I had said when he made the statement. And that's just not getting us anywhere. So, I mean, I think it's time for some real transparency down there. And I think hopefully after this process, people will demand transparency. And again, I just thank y'all so much for taking time to get this out there, because I know I'm going to sleep better. This is having all of this information for all this time, while a lot of people suspected we might have been the providers of the video for All on Georgia, and I know I'm sure they know about Eddie. And the other thing is, I know, and I say Eddie like I know him. I'd never met him. I'd never seen him. I never heard of him. I didn't know he was assistant principal at AIM. He called me up and he said, the truth about this needs to come out. I'd like to meet with you. And I said, sure. I said, but can I bring John Thomas? And he said, sure, that'll be fine. And then we met. But what this process has done, Richard, it's got people talking, and it's got the people sharing information and coming out. And I just want to tell people that may have information, talk to us. Eddie Powell is you can do just like Eddie Powell, and tell us what's going on so we can make the school system better. This process can work, and it may be a long road, but I think we're going to get there. We're certainly making progress.
Well, in your email to Forrest B. Johnson, you mentioned having pertinent information to this case. Have we talked about that pertinent information for this last hour?
I sure think so. I think there's some other, I think there's some other issues involving the district attorney that may or may not be pertinent to Mr. Johnson, but there certainly should be pertinent to this community.
Well, one last thing before we close. Both of you are up for re-election in 2018. And I assume that your detractors have been talking about potential candidates to oppose both of you. But one question that hasn't been asked is, do you, John Thomas, and you, Frank Myers, intend to run for re-election?
Well, for my part, I'm still weighing that decision. I haven't made a decision one way or the other.
Is that based on your potential opposition and who it might be, or is it?
No, it's not based on my potential opposition at all. That hasn't even entered into the equation. It's based on my own experience here as a school board member, and whether or not I can see any positive outcome as a member of the school board, not for me personally, but can I accomplish anything as a school board member? That's what my decision is going to weigh on. hinge on.
And you heard John's level of frustration with not being able to get information. And that is something that is just, it is extremely frustrating. But there's a part of me that really wants to just fight this out until we get this straightened out. You know, where we get a board that acts as a board and a superintendent that acts as a superintendent, and the board does its job of establishing policy, and the superintendent does his job of carrying out that policy, because that's basically what the law says are the jobs of the parties. There's no governance team. That's just some made up stuff. But to answer your questions, I haven't decided. And it really depends on some things that, whether I run or not, depends on some things that are kind of out of my control right now. I'm working on some things that business-wise and professional-wise, and you know, if they come through, you know, maybe I don't. But I've gotten a green light from my wife, which is something that's really important, because certainly wasn't going to, you know, think about even thinking about doing it, because I promised her I would, you know, only do it one time. And the truth is, I ran because my daughter was, you know.
Well, she's about to.
Can you finish that?
There was some talk that Frank's daughter was going to be kept from attending Columbus High School because of Frank's activism with the school board.
Okay, so good, thank you. So I ran to protect my daughter. Well, and she's got one more year, so that's going to be over, and that's the most important thing. I do love this job. I do love the fact that I think we're making a difference, but it's just so slow, and you feel like you're beating your head against the wall. But maybe, just maybe, something will come positive will come out of what we're doing tonight that'll change the landscape, because the school system can work if we let it. And if we have the right people in charge. And I think, you know, there's some disturbing facts that we've talked about tonight that, look, and again, I just want people at home to know, don't take it from us that there was wrongdoing. You can take it from the district attorney who called the GBI based on the same information that we're giving people tonight, in large part. So, you know, the wrongdoing's out there. But the answer is, look, if I run, I'm going to have a lot of money on the other side. I know that. But you know, I've never backed down from a fight either. So I believe in what I'm doing. It's just, I just don't know the answer to the question tonight.
So I guess we could summarize by saying you don't know.
I don't know. I probably should have just gone with that.
But one last question. Once this is posted, I mean, we've been talking over an hour. Once this goes online, who will be the first person to call you and complain or praise?
Complain or praise? I think the lines have been drawn. I think you know who the reformers are, and I think you know who the status quo is. And it's I do think, though, there are some people in the middle that this is going to move. And the question is whether it's going to tip the balance. I believe, look, you can look at the result of the Opportunity School District. We were only one of 7 counties in the state of Georgia that passed that. People have gotten the message. John and I I believe we have the wind at our backs. I really do. People have gotten the message that we can do better as a school system. So I think there are still some undecided people who may come our way. I don't think there's a downside.
John? Any idea who you'll hear from? Because you've got a board meeting coming up in just a matter of days.
Generally, I don't hear from people through telephone calls or anything like that. I do get a lot of interaction with the public just on a random basis, and through social media. So I expect there's going to be an outpour of that on social media. But my strongest supporters will say, you did the right thing, and the people that think I've done the wrong thing, I will not hear from them.
Well, this has certainly been an enlightening session, and I'm sure many people have learned many things about the school district and about Montravious Thomas. Thanks to 2 guys who can't keep their names out of the headlines. You, John Thomas, you, Frank Myers, thank you for giving your time tonight to talk with us. And if those of you who have been watching, remember to tell your neighbors so they can see this interview in its entirety on muskogee.allongeorgia.com. This is Richard Hyatt saying goodbye until next time.